Okay, so this next concept that we're going to talk about, I think, is a little bit challenging to explain and for people to conceive of. It's a little bit abstract. I call it the weight of a curve. And I probably started using this term when I was in undergraduate and graduate school because I was studying ceramics just as much as I was studying drawing. And when you're forming a vessel on a wheel, when you're throwing pottery, you're oftentimes thinking about the curves of the vessel. If you're making a vase or a mug or a bowl, you're thinking about what is the profile of that curve. And you potters out there will understand that you talk about the weight of the curve a lot. Instead of using it in terms of pottery, I use that same concept when I'm looking at drawing. So if I'm looking at how a curve falls, like say I'm looking at 3 different wine bottles, they might all have different profiles. And I find that my students have a difficult time seeing those curves really truly. So I've come up with this technique. It's kind of a combination of using sighting, of using plumb lines, of using your negative space, and your structural lines. So you'll want to check out all those videos that I have too. They all work together. And what I want to show you is what the weight of a curve really is so that you can see curves better and get those curves drawn in more accurately for your outlines. So the first thing I want to look at is this candlestick. You can see there are a lot of curves here. And the area that we're going to look at is this middle curve here. And we're going to pay attention to where is the widest part of that curve. So you can see that the widest part is right here. When I turn this around, you can see that I've taken a piece of tape and I've put it right below the widest point of the curve. That widest point of the curve, I would consider the weight of the curve. So you want to think of it like, where is somebody carrying their weight? Where is an object holding its weight? Is it up high? Is it in the middle? Or is it down low? So in the case of this, let's look at the page and we'll be able to see a photograph that I've taken of the same object, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So in the case of the candlestick, the weight of the curve really is at that widest point right here. And so you can see that below that, there's a slight curve in, and above that, there's a slight curve up, and then it goes straight up. So that is where I would say the weight of the curve is being held. Another way to think of it, if I can grab my ruler here, is that if I were to put the weight of the curve someplace along a horizontal line, it is, I would say, about just below the halfway mark. So you could think of it like the halfway mark of the object is right about here. I'm sorry, the halfway mark of that curve is right about here, and the weight of the curve is below the halfway point. So it's not at the top, it's not at the middle, it's not at the bottom, it's maybe about 2/3 of the way down. So that's going to really help me in drawing that shape in when I'm drawing this object. Let's look at a couple of objects that are simpler. Here we've got the bird bath again. And what I've done is I've drawn in a plumb line, that's a vertical line, and I've drawn it in right touching the widest point of the curve here. I can now go and see that I want the widest point of my curve on the drawing to be right there. If I were to put a vertical line, I want it to rest along that vertical. And so I probably need to move the weight of this curve down just a little bit. Probably this line needs to come in just a little bit more. And again, most of these adjustments you're going to find are hairline adjustments. They're about the width of a hair that you're adjusting it, but it will make a big difference in the overall perception of your shape. So now you can see that that widest part bulges out just a little bit lower than the midway point, and that looks a little bit more accurate to me. I'm going to adjust it a little bit more. Sometimes when my pencil isn't sharp enough, I can't quite get it in the exact right spot that I want it to be in. And remember, my approach to curves is that I'm always going to shave off bulges and puff up dents. So usually by doing that over and over again, I can get about to the right shape. So that looks more accurate now. Next, I can take a look at this curve right here. So I'm going to move my my vertical line here. And I can see that I have the weight of the curve just up a little bit too high. From this midpoint where it tucks in to the curve, it's about, I don't know if I can give you a fraction, but I would say it looks to be lower than I have it. So if I adjust that curve just like that, again, another hairline adjustment, which is why this Tombow Mono Zero 2.3 millimeter round eraser has a crazy long name, but it really works when you're making those hairline adjustments. So now you can see that this side looks very different than this side, and I'm going to need to make the same corrections here. So let's take a look at another example where I'm actually going to do that drawing for you. We're going to look at the pears. So what I've done is I've put in vertical lines, plumb lines, right at the outside edges of the pears. Now, my photocopy is moved around a little bit. Let me slide it back in. And then I want to grab a pencil, and I'm going to quick sketch in the pear. I'm not going to worry about whether or not this first rendition is perfect. I'm going to keep it light, and then I'm going to make changes to it. So there's my red pear, and then I'm going to look at that distance, and I want to create a similar distance between that one and the green pear. And I'm aiming for a relative copy. It might not be perfect. And keep in mind that these photographs are of plastic pears. I can never keep real pears in my studio. They go bad too quickly before I need to use them again, so I have to resort to the plastic ones, which I really don't like. They don't look quite as nice. However, it gives me a resource to use over and over again. Now, I can see that I made some adjustments that aren't accurate, such as this pear, the green one, is lower than the red one in the photograph, and I made them about the same height. I'm not going to worry about that. However, I am going to look at the widest points of the curve. So on this side, I want the widest point of the curve to be about midway up the bottom bulge, right about here. And that looks about accurate to me. And then you can see that this weight of the curve is actually lower. So it doesn't have to be parallel or horizontal. And I've got it probably right about there higher. So I need to change this shape a little bit and bulge it out just a little bit lower. Now, I don't want it to stick out like a sore thumb or a bump. So if I go out too far, I'm going to use that helper line. It's kind of the Goldilocks rule of drawing right there. You can check out that video too. I made it too small, then I made it too big, and the third time I made it just about in the right spot. Now it still looks widest right there, which is about equal to here, and I think I need it just a hair lower, so I'm going to bulge it out a little bit more there. Just a little lower. Now that looks closer. And when I erase around it, I've gotten something that's closer to accurate. Now I'm going to look at these over here. So this one, it's kind of an equal or a larger area that sticks out the widest. There wasn't actually one significant point that looked like it was wider than anything else. So I've made this section a little bit flatter, and I want to make sure that that section that's flatter is actually below this one, because I can see on the page here that that section is lower than this one. So then I'm going to bring this in a little bit more. And that was a lot of mistakes, so I'm going back to my Tough Stuff eraser just because it's a little bit more efficient when it's a bigger amount of mistakes. And then I want to look at the weight of the curve over here. That looks to me to be lower on the right side than on the left side. So I want to make sure that the widest point of my curve here is lower by about the same amount. So I need it to be right about there. So again, this is sort of a subtle concept. Think of it like if this pear was made of the same material that balloons are made out of, and it was filled with sand, and you could squeeze the sand higher or to the middle or to the lower part. A pear is squeezed at the top, so the weight of all that sand kind of hangs down at the bottom, and the widest point of that curve is what I call the weight of the curve. So hopefully this will help you in getting curves. I know curves can be really problematic for a lot of my students. It just takes lots of practice seeing, so make sure that you're using your eyes and make sure that you're spending as much time looking at your objects and your photographs as you are drawing, and then using this technique should really help you get those curvy shapes a little bit better. Thank you all so much for watching. More videos are coming soon, so if you wish to subscribe to my channel, go ahead and do that. And also you can check out my website, lzmstudio.com.